So, is there a number of costumes that you had to come up with here? I mean, can you number them? It must have been more than 1,000.
At least. I mean, we had days that were, 300 plus.
300 plus on single days.
Yeah. And then we also, because it was all singing, all dancing, the main ensemble, we...
Probably use this
I'm sorry. The main ensemble, we built all their costumes so that they were engineered to move within, flex, do everything that they needed to do with Justin's choreography, his beautiful choreography. So, you know, it required a lot of building, and then setting, I mean, for every person that you see in the film, I mean, I was approving all the looks. I have a team, or I had a team of assistants that were fitting the background from clothes that I had culled from different rental houses, and then all the things that we built, I was responsible for the designs and choosing the fabric, et cetera, et cetera. And it was, you know, much of it was because I wanted to control the color. You see from the very beginning of the film how Stephen and Janusz Kaminski, it's almost colorless, and then as you know the world opens up, then it tones itself.
Becomes very bright. Some of the dance pieces are just bursting with color.
Yeah.
So you built all the costumes for the ensemble, meaning the principal characters, the sharks and the jets?
Right. The sharks and the jets.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, you know, in the credits, one of the things that I've always been impressed by is that everybody has a name. And I mean, my first introduction to West Side Story was when I was in high school, and I was in a production of it. I played Officer Krupke. So it's been in my life for quite a long time. It was when I was in maybe the 10th grade, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it was that each one is individualized, and then that has to now, you know, it's fed into, or to when I was, you know, actually working on the film, it fed into how I approached, you know, depicting each of these characters. That each of them is, you know, is an individual with the backstory, and you know, therefore more specific.
How much time did you have from the time you started work till the start of production?
Trying to think, because I was on vacation when I got a call from Stephen's people, and then Stephen to have you know the introduction, and then after having an interview, he hired me, thankfully, and that was probably. Because we were filming. Now you're gonna ask me to choose dates. I mean, all of this happened before COVID, and then once we hit COVID, I've lost all track of time. So, but we were shooting. We were filming in November, because it was one of the hottest summers that I've ever experienced in New York. It was important for Steven Spielberg. It was important for him to shoot in New York. So we were working out of studios in Brooklyn, thankfully about 15 minutes away from my own home, and then shooting all over greater New York City, Harlem, Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn. We were all over, but it was hot, and we finished filming in September, probably the end of September. So it was the filming was
of production.
June to September, and then I started I think that our pre-production was starting February, maybe.
Yeah. Wow. So like 10 months of production.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable. And how big? I mean, I make movies with a costume designer, an associate, and like 4 students in the department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been there.
How many did you have?
I had a much larger team. No, I mean the way that it's set up, there's a wardrobe supervisor, David Davenport, who's amazing. Was an amazing gentleman to have on my team. And he is overseeing the whole department. And I'm his partner in overseeing the whole department, but my focus is artistic. His is managing the structure of the department and making sure that all of the roles are filled in order to support the size of a film. I had a team of 5, on a given day, it might be 4 or 5 assistants that directly answered to me. And then there were also 2 concept artists or sketch artists that were brought on board early in the process, and then once everything was designed, they were let go. And then we had an inside team, or an in-house team of probably 5 to 7 full-time, with some PAs, so maybe 3 PAs. And this was just in the principal studio.
Right.
Across the hallway was where all of the background was being done, and there were 3 assistants and a head of the background department. So there's a supervisor for that department, and then a team of they did the alterations. So I believe there was probably 6 to 10.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're probably looking at a department of
50?
roughly 45,
50, yeah.
Yeah.
Did Steven Spielberg approve each of the costumes in the ensemble?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of costumes.
My process always, and just to give you a little bit of background on my theater work preceded my film work, and I've been working in theater for a much longer time than I had, or that I have been working in film. But the process has always been, basically the same, at least speaking the same language. I start by talking with the director, reading the text again, meeting with the director, showing images that I've pulled together specific to how I see the show or film might be designed. If that's approved, if the director says, yeah, I'm signing on for that, I go away and I start to design more specific looks. And some of that is me actually drawing the looks out. And if it's theater, I'm drawing out everything. For film, it's a mix of me drawing it out and then engaging a sketch artist because of the world of film and studios and producers, and they like to have more of a representation of the actor in the costume. So that requires more digital imagery that blends those 2 together. So it's taking an artist through that and developing what all those looks are. Then at a certain point I was invited out to Amblin, which is Steven Spielberg's studio, and where he has his workspace. And I did a huge presentation in one of their conference rooms of sketches and research that were all posted on boards, and I talked through what my plan was all the way through the film, presented different ideas of color, like with the yellow dress, there was I presented a red dress and a yellow dress and an orange dress. And I had a favorite, but I also wanted to get Stephen's. I mean, I had to get Stephen's input on how he saw Anita and what he wanted to say with those clothes.
She was
and we
great.
said that for we discussed that for everyone. For Bernardo, and it just all this that comes back as I experience it again because it's been a bit of time since I've seen the film, but. The original West Side Story is hugely beloved by me, and it's hugely beloved by so many people, whether they're theater artists and audiences all over. And it has been since '60 or '60 when it was originally done.
Yeah, it's huge.
And everything that Irene Sheriff did with that design. She was the original costume designer. So it was really daunting for me as a designer to then approach how to reconceive what this world might be, and how to make choices that could potentially be as iconic as what we had experienced with the original West Side Story. So thinking about the yellow dress, which after right before the film opened, but then after that was an image that was shown a lot. You saw that in a lot of publications and
Anita's yellow dress.
Yeah, Anita's yellow dress
with the
for America.
fabulous sort of shoulders and just really quite beautiful.
And so I did. I mean, I knew that I wanted for her to always pull focus in that number. And how I was going to surround her with color so that she became the sun or the center of all of this energy, all this vibrant energy that was going on in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I just hoped and prayed that it was all going to work out right. And
it's very strong. Yes. Do people take notice of that? What other costume pieces did anybody notice that in particular? Yeah.
I was just wondering how you made a decision to put Tony in sneakers.
Tony in sneakers.
It was. It just seemed really appropriate for his age and also what he was. I mean, it was completely period as far as
the period.
style.
The period element is very important there.
I mean, I did the research behind, as I was talking about the early stages of my process, I was looking at a lot of Bruce Davidson, who was a photographer that had embedded himself with the gangs of New York at that time. So this is in the 1950s. Most of my immediate research was those actual photographs of the actual gangs that this was written about. And then supporting that with all kinds of research, whether it's catalogs from the period, other photographs like Gordon Parks, had a series of photographs that were taken at that same time that were from New York. I mean, it's always going to the source is very important for me so that I can then, if I know what it is, it's like knowing how to draw. It's like if I know how to draw a body, how to draw a figure, then I can apply that to how I express. If I know how to paint, I've always come from that point of view as I design. I know what period silhouette is, and how that's different from how the 1950s is different from a contemporary look or 1920s. I mean, so it's my job to know that. So that's where I start. So with the choice in the shoes, it's I am as a designer. I'm trying to merge those specific qualities of a period with a character, and when you butt those two things up, what does it say about who the character is? I think that there was a softness about the sneakers and an agileness about the sneakers that I think it spoke to who Tony is. The fact that he wears them to the dance at the gym, and what he, just what he has access to at that point in his life. And then what, for all of them, what their aspirations are. When I think about, how, just the setup of the story overall, which is what is so beautiful about this story, is that what's happening is you've got these two gangs that are fighting for their environment, for their space. And indeed, what's happening over all of it is it's actually being swept out from under them. And that's what, the fact that it was called West Side Story is that it really happened. Robert Moses was mowing down broad areas of New York City in order to rebuild and gentrify. This happened to be, as you saw in the beginning of the film, it happened to be where Lincoln Center now stands. So you have a neighborhood of disenfranchised people, some that are from families that had been embedded in that neighborhood, and then there are immigrants that are coming in from other places. That again, when you compare the jets that are coming through the neighborhood of the Puerto Rican, or more Latinx neighborhood, there's an aspirational quality about the Puerto Rican families that are coming through, or that exist in that neighborhood, against and contrasting with the Jets as they come through. And I think that you see that, I saw that growing up as well, and how I have been programmed to dress and present myself. In order to be seen professionally, I dress a certain way, which it gives me a different kind of package than somebody who doesn't really have to bother about how they're seen,
right?
Because of privilege. So it's there's a race dynamic that's going on, and it informed how I designed this. The structure of West Side Story.
Yeah, the clothing was very distinct. The difference between the Sharks and the Jets, and it seemed to me, the Sharks had earthier qualities. They had to the coloring, but pretty, sophisticated dress pattern nonetheless. In some ways, more interesting in some ways than the Jets, just in terms of the texture of it. To me, I mean, that's sort of the way it got to me.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I'd like to point out is that the Sharks actually, and it was important for Stephen to be to have this be clear. The Sharks were holding down jobs, and the Jets really weren't.
Yeah.
And their playground was, and their life space was it's a demolished area. Which is why they were so distressed, and so that's what their lives had become. And it's just creating these contrasts of these two groups was really important.
Yeah, the red belt. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, the Maria's scarf, that long scarf, was it blue or green or one of each? I can't remember, but just so many strong images. Other people have images that came to mind in watching the costumes. Jasper.
That are so strong throughout the film. And it feels like Maria and Tony to some degree have a certain neutrality to them. And it feels to me that Maria's, she starts with just the red belt and the white dress, and then she ends in a blue dress. I imagine the first film, it's been a while since I've seen it, there's maybe a similar sort of evolution in terms of color, and I wonder how you thought about that in terms of hitting those beats in that evolution through what she's wearing and those colors, and if that happened in the first film quite so distinctly.
It wasn't quite as, thank you for pointing it out. In the film, it doesn't bridge quite as directly, although two of Stephen's asks when I first started designing West Side Story was that Maria would have the white dress and potentially the red belt because it is from the original film, and that Bernardo would have the red shirt. For me, and then he gave me pretty much free rein around that. Just in developing what the story would be for the costumes. Because I set up these two worlds where the jets were largely blue with a quality of red, white, and blue. Like the jets are the only the jeans, navy blue jeans are only seen on the jets in the film, which is a very American connection. And then you have some contrast of red and white as well. With the sharks, it was always inspired by where they had come from. So the floral idea, and that it was just a richness of warmth and the temperature from where they of the island where they came from. For Maria, indeed, it was to hold them as neutral until Maria starts to come closer to Tony and takes on that blue tone when they're doing I Feel Pretty at Gimbel's, and then switching over to kind of a morning dark blue as well.
Now, you also have designed for Lin-Manuel Miranda, both In the Heights and Hamilton. I'm wondering, any particular costume challenges in Hamilton that you faced going in?
I mean, the difference, I mean, it's just as I was sitting and experiencing, the film again, there is great emotion that I feel when I see stories told through music. It wasn't so much, I mean, when you asked me about Lynn, it really wasn't, Hamilton was a challenge overall to figure out how to make the most of this brilliant piece of theatrical art that Lynn created, and not get in the way of that brilliance, and tell the story as clearly as possible in a way that was going to be exciting, compelling, and feel new, and also acknowledge these people that we're very aware of as Americans.
Sure, yeah.
And it's also a musical that needs to function both in time and also in choreography and dance. So it was the question was, how do I set up a system or a look that allows for things to be flexible and go from one thing to another? So I'm dressing women to embrace their femininity sometimes, and then also be able to put on military coats and hats and boots and operate as male soldiers. That was probably the more challenging part. Lynn was specific about wanting for Hamilton to be in a green suit. When he kind of takes his, he grabs hold of the specificity of what he's getting ready to do, or what the role that he takes on. But for me, I'm always trying to figure out what is that hook and how I'm going to tell the story that makes it more specific. What it came down to in a very organic way was that everyone was in a neutral until they started to take on specific characters. And then with those characters, they held to, and to be as consistent as possible, they held to a color palette that made them more specific, and then they moved through time in as clearly a way as I could possibly do it.
Now, on a production like Hamilton, a Broadway production, once the production starts running, you're not around anymore. Is that right, or are you?
It depends on if there's a change that needs to happen.
Yeah.
With Hamilton, we have a tour that's just gone out, so it required. And I have a standing team that oversees that. So for every production that is on stage, whether it's here on Broadway, or in New York on Broadway, or the tour, or when there were multiple tours, or the production that's in the UK or in Sydney, that team goes around and sets the production.
Yeah.
So, and the head of that team, Angie Kaler, is an amazing person and was on from the very beginning when we were at the Public. So she knows exactly what my intent was for that design.
And so she's in charge of keeping it consistent and implementing it and making sure that it gets installed really daily.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's a whole costuming team that comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, I am going to be going to, and then some, you know, what I was getting ready to say is that I do go in for early fittings early in the multiple productions. So I will be going to Hamburg because we're mounting a production of MJ, Michael Jackson's musical, or the musical about Michael Jackson, just because I want to make sure that it's set and designed from the beginning in the way that I want for it to be. I do have an associate on that has been on that production from the very beginning as well. It just helps to set a tone with everybody that's involved, and then I pull back.
And you've also costume designed for the Bolshoi Ballet and for other dance as well. What's distinct about dance?
I mean, it's, you know, I because I do musicals, I'm always engaged with movement. It just depends on if it needs to feel more like real clothes or less like real clothes.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm doing a production of Sleeping Beauty right now that's in Seattle with the Pacific Northwest Ballet Company, building from the ground up. It is choreography in a classical way, with tutus and point shoes and, you know, everything that you expect. It's the idea is influenced by the world of the Tlingit tribe, and that's because of the set designer. He's a glass artist that is of the Tlingit tribe, and so it's more Pacific Northwest.
Interesting. So it has a regional
more specific,
and some indigenous flavor.
Exactly.
Fabulous. And of course, he also designed the costumes for the upcoming huge extravaganza of Wicked, which is coming out at Thanksgiving.
November 22nd.
Yeah. And that must have been a blast, yeah.
That was an amazing time.
Yeah.
We filmed in London, so I was there for just under 2 years. We were working on both films. There were two films. There's a part 1 and a part 2. And it was a really wonderful and creative and full-on period of time. You know, I mean, as was West Side Story. You know, it was working with Stephen and his team was a dream, and you know, there's completely supportive, and Stephen was always engaging, and I was on. I mean, I look at every scene that is shot in the film, and I remember being on set, you know, sitting behind Stephen, dealing with things, and it was always an exciting and riveting.
So when you see the movie, a lot of other things are going through your head.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you got your start, sort of early work on Broadway, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, which is a great show.
Yeah. With George Wool.
Other comments from the audience? Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, you sort of brought it up, but was there some actress or actor in West Side Story that particularly worked with you on their costume? You know, a lot of actors want a particular feel
Well, it's a very important part of my job to work closely with the actors. And it's a very intimate, kind of relationship that I actually encourage when we're in the fitting room, and it's more about discussing, does this work for you? Does my idea work for the way that you see how you want to play the character? And oftentimes it does. Sometimes there needs to be tweaks that need to happen, either because of their own idiosyncratic feelings about their image, their body, like what, or some of it is function, that I can't do this or that in this sleeve or with this skirt, or so there are adjustments that are made. I usually work to get the original idea, because that's been approved, to work first, and then if that doesn't, then we go a different route. But there was a lot of focus, say, with Ariana, who I addressed before West Side Story on stage. She was in the original Hamilton, and then she was in Donna Summer the musical, about Donna Summer. So we had a rapport already, and I think that she felt like she could, if there was any issues, she would come to me. So that was not easy. I won't say that it was easy, but it was direct. Rita Moreno was very clear from the very beginning. When I showed her original sketches, she was in a dress, and she asked to be in trousers. And so I needed to rethink what that look was going to be, specific to what her idea was. I mean, for the, part of the joy of working on musicals in general, but working on West Side Story, was that the cast was young and hugely exuberant. I mean, you could see how much energy they put into the choreography and all of their scenes. And it was like that for every take that they took.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, so in all that heat, they were still hitting their mark. They were still giving it full, full performance. And it was, it was infectious. I mean, it was really,
Sure.
exciting to be there.
Yeah, it's it's that energy. I mean, it's emotionally, it's just a very powerful piece. I mean, the music, the lyrics, the choreography, the staging, and the story itself. I mean, obviously, it's just unbeatable. But to see it brought to life from a new generation of actors, and with some of these additional ideas, I mean, the presence of the Lincoln Center gentrification and stuff, bringing that in sort of thematically is, gives it some fresh life, which is interesting. But the bones on this piece are just solid as they could possibly be.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We can take one more question if, yeah.
I have a question less about design, but more about production. You mentioned having to design the costumes for the dancers, especially. Well, you're shooting in a hot environment, and I think dancers sweat a little bit. So tell me how many duplicates or how many costumes do you budget for a change going on?
That's an amazing question. It's one of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching, because we had probably for the yellow dress, I think that we had 3 dresses that we made, and there were 2 that were primary, like that. It gets to a place where the actor will prefer wearing, certain ones. So there was a hero, and there was a second, and then the third was a backup. And as you mentioned, yes, she sweat through her dress, and it, you could see the wear and tear. And so we were constantly giving notes to the people that are overseeing painting out any distortion. So, it's like, oh, well, we've got a lot of sweat stains that are coming through on Bernardo's shirt. Because the dance to the gym, again, it was one of those days that it was really, I mean, in the gym, They weren't, we weren't even outside. We were inside a private school in Brooklyn, and the air conditioning didn't work. So it was, it became pretty brutal. So we were just keeping track of what needed to be painted out, what was gonna look so bad that it really needed to be dealt with. So there's a whole team of people that are taking notes on that. And you have to have backup, for a dance musical. Yeah.
Well, Paul, we'd love to keep talking. The problem is we're moving into another time zone here where we need to start doing other kinds of stuff, like getting you dinner. But what a treat, really, to have the chance to see the film. It's so ambitious, so extravagant.
Thank you.